What's up, guys? Welcome to Roensch Capital Charts. Today we're taking a look at Palantir Technologies, ticker symbol PLTR, on a variety of different time frames in anticipation of the next trading day, Monday, January 29th. Well, Palantir here on Friday, finishing the day down just 11 cents, about minus 0.67%. So with a quick glance at the 1-minute chart here from Friday's trading day, nothing jumps out to me as incredibly clean intraday opportunities, at least on this chart. So let's move on here to the 5-minute chart and get a little bit more context going here. The one thing that immediately jumps out to me here, if we look here, is the volume. Okay, look at the volume on the opening two candles. The highest volume of the day, of course, not uncommon at all off the open, but also the biggest green candles on the day. You got some moderate volume fading going on in just immediately after, like 10-15 minutes after the opening bell. And then the majority of the rest of the fade for the rest of the day, kind of low volume chop until, of course, the very last candle on the day, which, by the way, was not an incredibly large red candle by any means, and the one after hours that was also high volume, a pretty basic candle there. So kind of a battle going on in the last, 5-10 minutes surrounding the closing bell between the bears and the bulls. The bears just, barely winning those two battles. But a really good kind of, oversimplified rule of thumb is that if you're seeing a direction that goes against your particular sentiment, if the volume is incredibly low, that's better, of course, than the volume being very high. Because when the volume is incredibly high, it means we're getting a huge, a much larger sample size, I'll say, of market participants agreeing on that move. So if you're seeing a big upside move and you're bullish, for example, and it's on massive volume, that's a good sign. So let's move on now here to the 30-minute and take a quick peek at the, we'll start here with the moving averages. I always like to start with the moving averages from a next day perspective on the 30-minute and then go through to the daily. So the charts I'm taking into the most consideration with the 50 period and the 200 period moving averages, of course, the two most common technical indicators by far are going to be the 30-minute, the 4-hour, and then the daily chart. The daily chart kind of being the granddaddy of them all. The 30-minute and the 4-hour adding additional context and potentially additional factors to support a particular trade. So you can see here the 50 period moving average acting as a slight resistance here on the Friday's trading day. And you can see here that was really given up off the open on Wednesday's morning. So looking at least at the 30-minute chart here from a bullish perspective, ideally reclaiming the 50 period moving average, backtesting, claiming it as support. That way we can start to work our way back up for a test of the 200 period, which is kind of usually a less common, bigger test, more eyeballs, potentially slightly more eyeballs. From a bearish perspective, you're looking at that 50 period on the 30-minute. You're just looking for consistent rejections to the downside, not enough strength to get back above there on the 30. But remember, we're always looking at multiple charts, not trading off of one chart in particular. Moving on here to the 4-hour chart, you can see kind of a similar story with the 50 period, at least on Friday's trading day. So again, if you're, positioned short with either puts or short shares on Palantir, you're looking at the 4-hour as well, and looking for a rejection off that 50 period. As a bull, reclaiming that is priority number 1. Again, looking specifically at the 4-hour, that's the priority on this particular chart. Let's now zoom out and look at kind of the granddaddy of all the charts, looking at more of a macro view, a day-to-day perspective here, the daily chart. You can see here, we have earnings coming up on Palantir on February 5th. But this chart here really tells a story. You can see, look, this white line, that's the 50-day moving average. This, lighter gray line is the 200-day moving average. Those two lines on the daily chart, each candle represents 1 day of trading. Those two are by far the most heavily watched indicators in the world on any particular stock in the market. The 50-day and the 200-day moving average, of course, on the daily chart, right? And when there's a lot of eyeballs, they become self-fulfilling prophecies, and you see heightened volume around those areas, meaning you see decision-making around those areas. So listen, bullish versus bearish perspective. If you're a bull, the slightly bigger picture, but in the short term priority right now on the daily chart is make our way up about 9% and reclaim that 50-day moving average. But remember, there is a level of potential technical resistance. This is a technical level, not necessarily a psychological level, but a technical level, which has now probably turned in to a psychological level, right? Due to the technical nature of it at around 18.25, lining up pretty close with that 50-day moving average, just under 18. That is priority number one if you're a bull. If you're a bear, you're thinking one thing. 16 has become kind of a short-term level here in the last couple of weeks of trading. Break downside through 16, make our way down to the 200-day moving average, and then ideally, of course, currently we sit around maybe 5.5% away from that 200-day to the downside. If you're a bear, you're looking for a downside break of the 200-day. That would confirm a lot of bears' bias and would be discouraging to a lot of bulls and encouraging to a lot of bears, at least in the short term psychologically, right? The same way that a bounce here off of 16, making our way back up to that 50-day, and especially a break and hold through there, would discourage a lot of bears and encourage a lot of bulls, which in the short term can, of course, help out with some volatility. Okay, volume recently here on Palantir has been maybe on the low end of average. Ideally, I like to see volume increasing, but recently the stock fading downside here, just very recently, just a very, very slow fade to the downside, starting, I would say that slow fade kind of began in mid-December here. You could argue that, back in mid to late November though. But again, if you're a bull, remember that you don't want the stock fading on really high volume, because that means that a bigger sample size is agreeing against you. So the lower volume reality of this name here right now is, all things considered, the stock is where it is. I would take that as a positive, if looking at this from a bullish perspective. Now, implied volatility, of course, an incredibly important data point if you are trading options. Understand that if you're trading options on the name, it's a little bit elevated compared to the recent past, approximately the last 45 trading days or so. Or sorry, 45 total days, looking back to like early to mid-December, it's a little elevated. So if you bought options, really, calls or puts, about a month and a half ago, understand that you have seen some Vega appreciation, right? Or if you're looking to buy them right now, understanding you're paying a little bit of a Vega premium, which does, it's not the end of the world, but understand that that does elevate some IV crush risk if we end up seeing implied volatility return to more of a short-term equilibrium compared to the last approximately 45 days. Just understand that if you're trading options, okay? Now, let's finish out here by looking at the chain, looking at what the options traders were thinking here on Friday heading into next week. 151,000 total contracts traded, 63% calls, remainder being puts. That's 94,000 approximately calls, 57,000 approximately puts. Let's look at the kind of the short-term speculation side of things, that 0 to 20 delta range, right? That's those gambly style, short-dated, cheap calls and puts. That gives us a lot of insight looking at the actual volume. Over 35,000 calls, nearly 25,000 puts. So you see here, this is very clearly overall call put ratio weighted to the bullish side. Short-term speculators are also weighted to the bullish side with over 35,000 calls in that 0 to 20 delta range and about 20,000 puts in that same 0 to 20 delta range. So listen, decent sample size, 150,000 total contracts, right? I like to see that as high as possible in the options chain, just to try to weed out any one trader throwing off the data substantially. But listen, whether this confirms your bias as a bull or goes against your bias as a bear, just understand that this is what the options traders and the options data is telling us from Friday heading into next week. Just take that as you will. That's the data though. Hey, listen, if you got value out of this video or you like Palantir stock, please subscribe to the channel. It's a brand new channel. Maybe even leave a like on the video. Consider doing so for the YouTube algorithm. Helps out tremendously, and I'll see you in the next one.